Okay.
Oh, wow. Fancy.
I'm seeing too
Very
much.
nice.
See this. Okay. All right. What we did last week was look at the coastline, split the Dalmatian coast to Dubrovnik. So this week we've got Zagreb and the Plebiscite Lakes. And so I've just marked here what we did last week. This coastal area, when you see all the islands, it's famous for all its islands and beaches, and it's a great place for the Europeans to go. And this week we're looking at Zagreb and the Plebiscite Lakes. We did a little trip up to this castle, which is not particularly famous for anything. It was just kind of a little picnic area. You notice I put the Hrvatska on here. If you're in Zagreb, that's what they would call Croatia. That is their name for it. And I think it comes from the Polish. The Slavs and Poles were the original ones that settled Croatia way, way back. I think that's where that name comes from. So you all know, if you've been with me at all before, that you know that I like the national dress of the islands and the countries that I go to because I was a folk dancer for many years. So this was the trip to Croatia. The trip to Zagreb was a friendship force trip where we had a homestay for a week. And I stayed with the daughter of this lady here who was president of the club. This is Perina. She always wears the white national dress, and she lent us this dress to try on. It's not gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
And she's a professor, a retired professor of Italian. Speaks several languages, of course. Her buddy and another lady that I stayed with on my second trip is Vlasta, and she was a retired Supreme Court judge. So we had some interesting people in this little group. This picture was taken the second time. Our flight from Split to Bucharest to Romania got canceled. And so we weren't going to be able to make our connection in time. So we ended up taking the train and staying overnight in Zagreb the second time, and Vlasta hosted us this second time. And we weren't expecting to see Pirina. You see her in her white coat. She always wears white because she was supposed to be leading a trip. So she lives in the old town and I stayed in the old town. And so Vlasta was showing us around a little bit. Teresa had not been there before. And we're walking around the corner and there she is. And we both threw up our hands and said, "What are you doing here?" You know, neither one of us expected to be in Zagreb that day. So that was a fortuitous event. We had a little time to spend together and had coffee and so forth. So this was our second trip and our second meeting. So my place that I stayed the first time was right through this little place right here. This is in the main square. And these Baroque buildings are all around it. And my fourth floor apartment of Perina's daughter was up here. She had just moved into it. And in fact, she hadn't even lived in it yet. So we got to walk up to this apartment, but right smack in the old town with everything right nearby. So as you walk through this little archway here through to the next street, to Podzilla Street, this little man here with the jewelry shop was waiting for you to give you some, to sell you a little bit of his jewelry. So this is the big square. This is Ban Josip Jelačić. And if you remember from last week, maybe you don't, what Ban meant was, it meant viceroy. So it was a title. And Croatia, like many of these countries, changed hands multiple times with different countries taking rule over them, the Venetians, the Hungarians, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so on and so forth. And so Ban was he was the one in charge, but he wasn't the king. So Ban Josip actually was a famous person, and we'll see where he fits in history. So it was an old town, Roman settlement. Of course, that whole area goes way, way back even to the Neanderthals. Settled as two different towns, the capital and Gradic. This is the town up on the hill that you saw the little picture of St. Mark's. We're going to see some more of in a minute. And then the lower town, the eastern town, was mainly where they put the cathedral. It was founded by King Ladislaus, who was Ladislaus, I should say, coming back from a campaign, founded the lower town and the cathedral. So there are really two parts to the town. and they were reunited. They were united as one city by Ban Josip Jelačić in 1851, quite late actually. So Zagreb got attacked many times over the years. This upper town was fortified. It was originally walled. It's not walled anymore. This hill is not very large that it's on. So we'll see how you get up there. It's just a matter of a few steps up, but it is a little bit higher than the lower town. Became the Croatian capital in 1557, but again was not independent until later. When it did become independent after World War II, or during World War II, it was backed by the Axis powers. And it wasn't really till after the war it became part of Yugoslavia, part of the 7 countries that were part of Tito's Yugoslavia. And then, of course, there was the war, which was basically against Serbia from 1991 to 96, and they gained their really, really true independence in 1996. So that's the brief history. I won't go into every battle yet and bore you till midnight. So when we were in Croatia the first time in Zagreb, the cathedral was under construction because it had been bombed badly in the war with Serbia. And I'll have a picture of that in a minute. When we came back in 2009, you can see the differences. It's been all cleaned up. You can now see the entrance to it, and one of the towers is free from scaffolding. This is on just 2 blocks from where I stayed, right in this lower town, Cathedral of the Assumption. So since it's dedicated to Mary, it also has many statues of Mary around. Beautiful entrance now. Here's a picture of what the interior looked like during the bombing of the war. We saw last week that the Serbs also bombed the UNESCO town of Dubrovnik. And when this happened in 1991, I was planning to go to Croatia at that time. Of course, that delayed my trip by 16 years, as it turned out. But I was literally in tears because I'd seen pictures of Croatia and was looking forward to going. And really, it was a personal thing to me that these places were bombed. So it's been restored. This is what it looks like. It did look like in 2009 it had been restored. And the bishop's palace was next to it. This was all part of the bishopric that Ladislaus had founded a bishopry there. Some little garden there had. And outside in the square, just in front of the cathedral, the bishop's palace, the cathedral will be here to the left. It's a beautiful statue of Mary and saints around it. And here are some close-ups of those statues. Some of the angels, archangels. And looking the other direction, standing in front of the cathedral, looking the other direction is some other buildings. This is a restaurant where my group ended up their tour when I toured the first time. So this is Podzilla Street, the street where I lived, and the place where I lived was just behind these buildings right here. Lots of little sidewalk cafes. It's very walkable. And in fact, most of the central city is pedestrian only. So it's a very walkable city. As I say, it's a short a few steps up to the upper town. Here's one of the people in our group helping an old lady down the steps in the market area, going up to the market. So this is where she had been, up in the market, just above there. So these are typical scenes of flower markets. There are lots of flowers. An antique market that was open one of the days that we were walking around. This is the train station in Bacamia. I had come in on the train the first time, or left on the train, I forget which now. And this green space is like Central Park almost on a much smaller scale. It goes down about 10 blocks or so. And King Tomislav is the fellow up here on the statue here. He was the first ruler who was called king. In the year 925, though, as I say, he was really a Bon, not a king. And the red, somebody asked me the other time about why was he wearing a red? It was a holiday. We were there on June 1st, which is a procession to the Virgin Mary, which you'll see too. So we were able to see that. So Tomislav defeated invaders, and this park was named after him. These are some of the park areas. So it stretches all the way down from the train station down here, probably 8 or 10 blocks and about a block wide. In the lower area is the nice parts of Croatia as far as things to do. The upper part is more the government buildings and embassies. So in this lower part, we have the Croatian National Theater, which is a beautiful Baroque building built in 1985. I'm sorry, it should be 1885. I don't have the right number on there. This I did not take off. This is off the internet, but we were able to go to the ballet one night in the theater and a downtown shopping arcade. A small botanical garden, just a few little flowers from it. We didn't see a lot of it, though it's a pretty good size. Quite a few of the museums then are in the downtown area, the art museum. And my favorite of the ethnographic part of this museum is ethnographic with the national dress, which I like. Each of these islands is like a separate country in a lot of ways. There'll be their own dishes, their own clothes and headdresses and things that they wear, things that they make. So these different colors, dresses that you see reflect the different parts of the country. Did somebody have a question about that? I'm hearing somebody talking.
Oh, Janice needs to mute herself.
Oh, okay.
If you're not muted, please mute yourself.
Yeah, I can't tell if someone's trying to ask a question or
Yeah.
what. Okay, yeah, again, there are lots of different craft items that they make this lace work because they do these headdresses, boots and different kinds of footwear, ribbons. Some of the headdresses have ribbons on them. So I especially like that kind of stuff. So this is another way you can get to the upper town on this little funicular, which maybe costs 50 cents or something like that. It's not very far to go, just a few minutes. But you can also walk up, and there are a couple of ways to walk up as well. And when you get to the top, this is what you see, the rooftops of the lower town. So one way to walk up is through this stone gate. It's through Podzilla and around the corner, which was where we saw Pirina in her white dress, coming up through the stone gate built in 1375 to honor Mary. And we'll see this building in the next slide as well. So under this arch back in here, you'll see a shrine to Mary, and the pilgrims come and they'll put their lighted candles there to honor Mary. So a little bit about the upper town before we get to that procession. So the upper town is called, and I'm not sure about the pronunciation on that, the Gornji Grad, built into the defense walls. Now the walls that were there originally are not there with the exception of a tower, which we'll see. And gradually absorbed into the city of Zagreb. The two interesting churches, St. Mark's, which you already saw in a picture, and St. Catherine's and the stone gate and the towers are really what you want to see. So there's that building again where the stone gate's underneath. The pilgrims would come around this corner and around this way. So they were coming up this way. That's a sloped walk. And it's where Pirina's house is. So we were able to literally walk out the door. We started hearing this singing. They had loudspeakers all through the town. And people gathered up and were singing all through the town. There were groups of nuns and priests. Now, why am I getting this right here? Are you seeing this? Please move this window away.
I am.
That is.
I am.
I don't know what that is. I don't know how to get rid of it. Anybody know? Please move this window. Well, maybe it's going to go away by itself. Here you see some of the groups of people who are probably related or from the same area wearing the similar clothes, and nuns and different religious groups. Please move this window. Well, I don't know how to move that window. That's kind of a pain, isn't it?
Oh, look at that roof.
Yeah, well, okay, I don't want that either. Yeah, this is what we were looking at on the photo that you saw.
Oh, it is. That Kathy had done.
Yeah, this church had been bombed and early on, very early on. And when they re-roofed it, they did the tiles on the roof. And this is the a symbol of the city of Zagreb, and this is the logo for the country of Croatia. So you notice the gray skies the first time I was there. So, but later on, second time, not so much. St. Mark's is really dark inside, so that accounts for the graininess of this picture. I was like taking pictures in absolute blackness. The windows showed up okay, but the picture inside was not too good. So the second time we were there, Vlasta's son was also in town. We were admiring some of the artwork that was out in the little patio or square in front of St. Mark's. This is just right in that square. The other church is St. Catherine's, more of a Baroque church, and it has these ceilings that have the stucco work on them. A much lighter church, as you see. It does not dark, and they have all this kind of stucco build up to make all these little pictures and little angels and stuff. And this is one of the side altars and the organ. This is the Parliament building on one side, one of the embassies. I think I've got another picture of the Parliament as well. And in the old town, since it is older, really, has a lot of these old doors and windows that are interesting to see if you like that kind of thing. Older houses. And pod means street. So that's one word I know in Croatian, but I don't know much. The outside of the Zagreb Museum. We had a little rain that first trip. So this is about the city of Zagreb itself. And this is Perina's daughter, whose apartment I stayed in, myself and another lady. So the town was built on the upper hill, as she's showing us, our guide was showing us. She gave us a little tour through there, and there's a model of the city, which changed a couple of times. And if you look closer, you're going to see that those same little three towers that we saw in the church a minute ago. The coat of arms of the city of Zagreb, but it did go back to Roman times, so there are remnants of the Roman wall on that time in the old city, even though the wall itself is not there anymore. I didn't have another place to put this, so it's just kind of stuck in there. The present population of Zagreb is around 800,000. So there's all kinds of stuff in the museum from different churches and different things to see, paintings of what it looked like different times, some of the building, some of the armor. And this is one of my favorite pieces with Roman soldiers as chess pieces. Some more of the gates. And whoops, went right by that one. One of the rooms has the city streets line on the floor. Have to go to the little shop. One of the interesting places to see in Zagreb is the old cemetery. I didn't know that it was called this until I started looking up something about it. But you see how far down it goes. It's blocks and blocks. This is just a side entrance to it right here, and it's arcades all the way down here. And it's a beautiful place to go visit. Lots of cemeteries are in some of these towns. They're not like our cemeteries that tend to be kind of all the same. Theirs are all different. So these different arcades are parts of the arcade. Some of them have tombs that are in the floor and in the side. Sometimes they have different patterns on the floor, lots of statuary and different mementos to the people who are buried there. And some of the different patterns on the floor and artwork. And the outside of the cemetery looks like this, and I did not take this picture, but I did take this one. This is the same memorial to the first president in 1991, Tudjman. And the cemetery itself is interesting. If you're not in one of those arcade tombs, you might be have something built on top of your tomb like this. There's quite a bit of artwork in the cemetery and in places like this that are memorials to different events, and I'm not sure what all of them are. This was World War II, and there's memorials, of course, to the people who died in the War for Independence. So I said we took a little side trip to this castle, which doesn't have any historical significance at all. It is open to the public. This is, again, one I took off the internet because we didn't actually see this lake. I didn't know this lake was there until I started looking for pictures of it, but I do have pictures of the interior that I took and the view from it. So we saw the other side of the castle, which was this side, and we had a little picnic down here with the group from Zagreb who took us up for the day, just a little outing for our welcome party. So in the castle itself, there are the things that you might see in an 1800s castle. Oh, again, they're sneaking by me. So there's lots of woodwork. Some of the stoves that we've seen in other older castles, but you know, it's a hunting lodge kind of place. Lots of woodwork. This is one of the stoves, the ceramic stove. The other place that we visited on the second time there was a fort that had been built on a high place outside of Zagreb. It fell into ruin also as a result of earthquakes. So some of this wall was rebuilt. Some of it you see is still in ruin, but there was some rebuilding on it. And in this aerial view, I did not take either. But this is what it looks like when we were there with my travel buddy and Vlasta's son. So there's still the ruins and then some of the rebuilt places that we can see. They do have some festivals up there. Again, my finger's too quick. They have some Memorial Day weekend. They have the Queen and her retinue and this sort of thing. They have music up there. So it is used and it's kind of a little place that you can go for fun. We also had lunch nearby on a mountaintop, but I didn't include that. The highest point in Croatia is over here. Somebody asked last time if they had winter. Actually, Vlasta is a big skier, and she goes up into these mountains that are just right on the border with Slovenia. The Julian Alps are called, and they're skiing in the winter, so they do get some snow. And our last stop in this portion of it is the Plebiscite Lakes. And it is an absolutely magical place. It's one of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Croatia, the other two being Split and Dubrovnik, the whole town. I wanted to show you a kind of a map of what it was. There's a little town here, but you see the lakes up high. This is kind of the way they keep dropping down, and in between are all these waterfalls. The cutaway would show you the different levels, and there are 16 lakes. And all this is wooded, and it used to be pretty inaccessible until somebody with deep pockets in Croatia said more people, particularly Croatians, ought to be able to see this beautiful place. So he sprung for putting in walkways, wooden walkways all the way through. So these walkways that you're seeing were financed by somebody who had lots of money in Croatia who gave those to the country, and made it possible then for tourists to come in and see this wonderland. So it's kind of divided into the upper lakes and the lower lakes. And most of the waterfalls are small, but look at the size of this. These are the people down here. So you get an idea of the scale of this. This is the largest of the waterfalls. And it was the first national park in Croatia, proclaimed in 1949. Over 73,000 acres and now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So it's a beautiful place to see wildlife and birds, and it's very quiet except for this rushing water. And there's water everywhere. It's all marshland and woods. And we're kind of on top, in this picture, on top of this waterfall and looking down over it.
Mary, what's the general elevation of Croatia?
Well, of
Do you
course,
know?
sea level at the coast. Zagreb is about, I think, 600 feet above sea level. It's not very high, but the mountains are right behind it, the Julian Alps. But along the coast, right behind Split and these towns that are along the coast rise the Biokovo Mountains. And they're, I don't know, I'd say maybe 2,000 feet. They're pretty high, considering they're coming from sea level.
Okay, thank you.
So this is this high one again. The central part of Croatia is just kind of rolling hills and it's agricultural, and the eastern part. So they have a variety, you know, of mountains, coastline with the beautiful beaches, and the high mountains and on their northern border. Well, I lost it again. So about 1 million people a year visit the Plebiscite Lakes, and there are places to stay right in that little town. We stayed overnight. We're able to walk through the upper lakes one day and the lower lakes the next day. So if you're there, you might as well see what you can. There are a lot of places that just go for the day and you're there for an hour or two. Well, that doesn't begin to cut it. It's right at the border of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and they in fact have the river Una, which is similar to this in that it runs, it has the waterfalls dropping just like this one does. So it has a similar park right across the border. So yes, there is wildlife here. We really didn't see that other than the birds and the fish. The fish are in the clear parts that are shallow. You can see fish in the very clear water of the lake.
Mary, Dave Peck asked if you have a special connection. He might have missed the very beginning. Like, did you have a special connection to this area of Croatia, or like family or something, I guess, or did you just?
Not family. My connection was through Friendship Forest that I had always wanted to go. I knew someone who had gone and showed me pictures and said, oh, I want to go there. But I didn't get to go until 2006 because our club then was assigned to Zagreb as a place to visit. And I was the coordinator for the Dallas club, and Perina was the coordinator for the Zagreb club. So I got in touch with them then. And I've been in touch with them all these years. Until this year, I did not hear from either one of these ladies. I've seen both of them in the United States. Lasta came to our international conference in Atlanta. I don't know if I should spend the time telling you how that happened. It was she hadn't intended to come. Perina was at the conference and registered at the conference. Lasta was going to go skiing, but there was no snow. So this is the week before the conference. So she booked an airline ticket and then went to go get a visa. She's a little squirrely sometimes. So she got a visa and called some of the people who had lived nearby to show her around. She did not go to the conference. She didn't know what she was going to do for the week. When it was over, I grabbed her and we spent a few days in Atlanta with a homestay. Following that, I got someone to put her up. And then she came with me in the car. We stayed with Evergreeners in Winston-Salem and in Raleigh, who also at the last minute found room for one more lady. And then she flew back from Raleigh to Atlanta and got her flight back. So I ended up sort of adopting her for that week. And so when our flight canceled in Croatia in that second trip, I called her up and said, hey, are you home? We'd like to stay with you. Would you like to pick us up at the airport tomorrow and then take us back, you know, because you owe me. So, yeah, she was happy to do that. So I did see her in the United States and spent a week with her, and then again in Croatia, but I don't know what's happened to either one of them. Perina was in the United States for that conference, and then again in Dallas. One of her daughters is a physician, and she was at a conference at the Fairmont in Dallas. So she came with her and stayed in the Fairmont and was able to see the sights downtown. But she told me she was coming, and I picked her up and we did the Arboretum and some of the things that were farther out that she couldn't walk to. And she wanted to see my house. You know, what is my house like? You know, she was living in a house from 1400 in the old part of town. And so she came up and she was fascinated with mirrors that I have in my house and my stairway. So I have a picture of her in my mirrored stairway.
Oh, fun.
I don't know what's happened to them this year. We're at the age where people disappear and, I don't know. So I hope they're all right. So this is the only wildlife I saw near the Plebiscite Lakes. It was at the restaurant. And I'm going to end with showing you the fish in the clear water. And we're going to end the Zagreb Plebiscite Lake portion of this and then let you get on with your.
Well, there actually was a question about the fish. So in those Plebiscite Lakes, what type of fish, and did you see any fishermen?
I don't think they're fishermen because it is a national park and it's UNESCO. If you can tell me what these are, I'd be glad to know. They just look like fish to me. I'd guess trout, maybe lake trout. I don't know. I don't know what they are, but you see how clear the water is that you can see them.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You can see them.
Do you know how those lakes were formed? What geological thing happened or?
Very little. That rock is called karst, Karst.
Yes.
And it's like a lot of ours. It's volcanic in parts of that country. They've had a lot of earthquakes. They're mountains, and I'm not sure how that particular park was formed, but it does, as you saw in the chart, it does have the lakes descend in from one level to another. My guess is that we're just earthquakes moved some of that rock around. I am not sure about that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can look that up. I haven't seen that particular question answered.
Okay. Well, that was really interesting. I think a lot of us would just love to go.
Well, there are a lot of tours that go to Croatia, but most of them don't go to the Plebiscite Lakes. And to me, it was like, well, if you're going to go to Croatia, why would you want to miss that? As I said, it's just, to me, it was just a magical place. It's just being surrounded by these woods and this water and this running water. It was this clean air kind of place,
Yes. So if you were going to stay at the lakes, you said there was a little village nearby. Is that something that has to be planned months and months in advance?
I would think so.
Okay.
If you're going on a tour, they would probably book you into one of those or a couple of hotels there. You can go it's maybe 100 miles or so, or 75 to 100 miles to Zagreb or to the coast. You can drive to it fairly easily or, go on a bus. So it would be doable. But as I was saying, if you're just going to spend an hour there and then go on somewhere else, it'd be a shame to not see more of it because every turn that you make, you have another beautiful view. And,
right.
Like going to the Grand Canyon and looking over and saying, okay, we saw it, let's go. There's just more to it than that.
Yes. There's another question from Gail Turner. Said the shape of the country is interesting. Were there natural barrier lines or political lines drawn?
They weren't natural lines. They depended more on what populations settled there. And I talked a little bit about that last week, that Croatia was settled by the Croats and Slavs from the Poland, that area, and came down. Whereas the people from Serbia were a different group of people, came from somewhere else. So the countries formed along lines of the populations that lived there. And then during the time of Tito, which was 25 years or so, they started mixing and intermarrying because there were open borders in the 7 countries, even though there were 5 different languages and 4 different religions. They were all quite different, but they were under Tito and they had open borders. So there was a lot of mixing. And then when the former Yugoslavia broke up, and people, those countries wanted to be independent. They've always wanted to be independent. Slovenia had the shortest war, 7 days, with Serbia kind of said, okay, now we're in charge. We're going to be the new Yugoslavia. We're going to reunite everybody again. And they said, oh, I don't think so. So Slovenia got out fairly easily. They had very little damage. Croatia lasted about 4 years. They ended up having, with Montenegro and Bosnia, Kosovo, I'm sorry, with Kosovo. So they didn't get all the countries, but they got a few of them. And the rest of them are independent. So they pretty much formed on the basis of who lived there. Some are Muslims, some are Catholic, some are Orthodox. They speak different languages. There are real differences. And then, as I was telling you too last time, that once they did get their independence, then they pretty much didn't want those people who had moved in there anymore. That the Croatians didn't want the Serbs there anymore, and the Serbs didn't want the Croatians there anymore. So you had this big exchange of people. I mean, thousands and thousands of people moved. It's similar to what happened with India and Pakistan, where they split based on their ethnic, who they were ethnically, religiously, language, so forth, and moved back to where their grandfather lived. They may have been there for a couple of generations even. So now they're more Croatians in Croatia instead of, like, I think it was like 70% Croatians during Tito's time. Now it's like 94%.
Okay.
So more of those people who are not Croatian don't live there anymore.
Well, so another part of Gail's question was, are they friendly with their neighbors? So,
well, in the sense that they visit them or have family, they can cross over, but there's a lot of animosity when somebody bombs your place, and yeah, they didn't get over that very easily.
okay. Let's see. Kathy, who has been to those lakes, said that there are many places, hotels, and private homes that rent out that are close within the park. You must get tickets for the park ahead of time.
Yeah.
And you schedule a specific time to go into the park.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Was English widely spoken as a second language?
Yes, all over. As I was telling you last week too, that the kids, even when I was there in 2006, their kids from first grade were learning English as a second language. So everybody under 20 already spoke English. But we also stayed with the people in the Zagreb group, did all speak English quite well.
Okay. So following up on the fish question, Jack said the fish in the photo are probably chub, C-H-U-B. It looks like water that would also hold trout.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just FYI.
I'm not the fish expert.
Okay. Gail, your hand is still up? Is that just from before, or do you have another question?
No other questions, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. All right.
Fascinating presentation,
yeah.
thank you.
One more
Yes.
thing about my screensaver in back. The picture I have in back is
Yes.
Croatian Coast. The coast varies a lot. There's sandy beaches, there's rock formations. Some of it goes straight up the mountains. Some of it have little towns all along there. The other thing I did that second time was to go hiking for a week, and I have some gorgeous, gorgeous pictures. This was from one of the hikes we did along the coastline. So someday when you are ready to look at more Croatia, we can do another one on the hiking trip, which are totally different pictures.
Okay. Well, that was part of my question about the elevation, because I know that, like, you can hike in the Rocky Mountains that are in southern Canada, and it's so different than hiking in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. Yeah. Because in Canada, you're starting at sea level, and in Colorado, you're starting at a mile high. Right. And so the ease of, you don't have the altitude issue in Canada.
Yeah, it's just like, it's like seeing Mount Rainier when you go to Seattle. It just looms over the city, but it's coming from sea level, as you're saying. And it's a lot,
Yeah.
but in Colorado, we were already up 4,000 or 5,000 feet.
Right, right.
So,
Okay, well, thank you, Mary. Again, that was just wonderful. Really appreciate that. And we will get a recording up and posted on the blog as soon as we can.